I want to welcome the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Labour, Patty Hajdu, who is also my friend. She comes from Thunder Bay. She's kind of like us. She was a local activist in the community focusing on public health. She was in charge of our drug strategy in Thunder Bay for a number of years. Her last job before getting elected in 2015 was the executive director of our shelter house, which not only did the shelter piece, but developed a managed alcohol program. You know, a new way to kind of deal with disability, right? Alcoholism is one of those things which we define as a disability. So she was elected, as I mentioned, in 2015 in the riding of Thunder Bay Atikokan. And she's like a rising star in the cabinet. It's like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Like, just a normal person is like, there she is. And she's a regular guest on my TV show in Thunder Bay. So you can watch that online on YouTube, do the search, and it's not the normal kind of show. We kind of explore, actually, it's almost a little history of her both as an ED at Shelter House and then as she's progressed through her political career. So I want to welcome Patty, and what else can I say? Welcome.
Well, thank you, Steve. Steve said he was going to say nice things about me, and he lived up to his word this year, so that was nice. Thank you. And he's right, I am one of us, and that's why, one of you, one of us, that's why we have such a great democracy in Canada, because you don't have to be a millionaire to get elected, so that's kind of a nice thing we should hold on to here in Canada. It's a matter of, yeah, right? Isn't that great? You know, when I ran, Steve's right, I had talked about disability in the context of mental health and addictions for a very, very long time, and in fact believed that everybody deserved a safe place to live and the sense of inclusion, regardless of their particular condition in the case of the folks that I worked with. And that was a hard sell. As a matter of fact, people that are living with mental health and addictions face discrimination like many of you do in your everyday lives, and the kinds of folks that I worked with by the time they reached my agency, which was a large homeless shelter in northwestern Ontario, the results of that discrimination and stigmatization and exclusion from services and community and housing and healthcare, you name it, had led to some pretty profound outcomes that were in many cases not reversible outcomes. And in fact, I was so struck by the inequity, the systemic discrimination that folks experienced, and layer on additional physical disabilities or other kinds of barriers that they were living with. I was so struck by that systemic discrimination, particularly in the healthcare sector, oddly enough, that I decided that I couldn't actually rant through letters to the editor anymore. I had to take a chance and run for to become the Member of Parliament for Thunder Bay Superior North. So which is the other side of town. We have two sides, So, and so much to my surprise, and I think the surprise of many other people, because it was a male-dominated riding. I was the first female in my riding to be elected as Member of Parliament. I was also the first person that came from probably poverty and a single mother to be elected in that riding. Much to everybody's surprise, I won, and so here I am, and I have this amazing platform and ability to shape the way that we think about our fellow Canadians, the way that we talk about people with disabilities, including people with mental health and addictions issues, the way that we design our programs and our legislation, and the way that we spend our money, quite frankly. And as the Minister of Employment, Skills Development and Labour, the Minister of Employment portfolio actually has the most money In fact, we spend billions of dollars across this country, whether it's through agreements with provinces and territories for funding for skills training, whether it's in partnership with organizations that deliver skills training to vulnerable youth, whether it's through Indigenous skills training in partnership with Indigenous communities, whether it's in partnership with unions through union-based skills training and helping bring in new faces to the trades. We spend a lot of money on skills training. And how we spend that money is shapeable. And that's what's so great about being the Minister of Employment, is that I have an ability now to do this advocacy from within government, which is exactly why I wanted to run. I wanted to see what would happen if you were doing the kind of hard work that many of you have been doing your whole lives on the outside of government. What would that feel like to do it from the inside of government? And I will tell you that it is equally hard in different ways, but it is so fulfilling when we're able to start to move the bar forward and where we're able to start to see those changes within our own departments. And I will tell you that 3 years ago, when we took over Ottawa by storm from the Conservative government of the day, there were a lot of changes that were required. And many of you will recall how difficult it was to have a minister present to conferences, for example, on issues that they either didn't care about or they didn't want to talk about. As a matter of fact, I remember profoundly being at a housing conference in Vancouver and Candice Bergen getting up and talking about homelessness in a way that was profoundly disrespectful for people that were living with significant challenges and living in a state of homelessness. And we wanted to change that. One of the first things that we said to ourselves and we promised during the election was, even when conversations were difficult, we wanted to meet with people. And we wanted to meet with all kinds of people. And we wanted to hear those perspectives that differed from our perspective. And even if we couldn't get there as quickly as people wanted us to get there, or we couldn't do it in the same way, that didn't mean that we stopped talking. And so to me, that's one of the most important parts of my job as minister, is to be here with an open heart and an open mind, to tell you what we're doing and how we think that's going to help, but also to listen to you, to say, hey, how can we do things better? And so when, I know that you heard from Kate Young earlier to talk about the accessibility legislation, and, I'm really excited about the accessibility legislation. It's one piece, but it's a really important step towards acknowledging the rights of people with disabilities to full inclusion, to full participation, and certainly a leadership role that we can show at the federal level. I think it is a first step in cultural change. I will tell you that we're working on trying to change culture and attitudes and systemic racism and barriers for people my entire professional life, and I will tell you that legislation alone, I don't believe changes that. It's certainly a good step, but it's going to take more. And that's where I think the kinds of things that I get to do as Minister of Employment will help. And I want to talk to you about some of those things because I think I want to eventually be able to have a more in-depth conversation. I think the work that you're doing on your strategy is going to allow us to have that in-depth conversation about how we as a government can start to shift how we're trying to make changes in terms of work outcomes for people with disabilities and really accelerate that work and make it even more effective. We have a booming economy. You've heard us talk about that. Of course, there are regions that are doing better than others, but overall, it's a good news story. We have the lowest unemployment rate in Canada in 40 years. What does that mean? It means that employers are searching for talent in different parts of the country. And, obviously, different regions are different, and, not to deny the hardship that some provinces are feeling or some particular communities are feeling, but overall, as a Minister of Employment, what I hear from employers is, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough talent. And then when you ask them about what they're doing to dig deeper into those underrepresented people that oftentimes are extremely talented and many times very well skilled, what are you doing to actually tap into those people, whether it's Indigenous people or people with disabilities or newcomers or women, often underrepresented in a variety of sectors? I'm kind of met with a blank stare. People think they're, in some cases, doing a good job. They have intentions to do a good job. They certainly don't want to be perceived as an employer that isn't doing a good job, but their practices haven't evolved in a way that actually lead to those changes. And so when I talk about culture change, it's just that. It's actually what can we do as a federal government to start to change those cultures? One of the things that we do, and I question whether, and I think the data will show after, 4 years or so of government, but one of the things that we're doing now is that offering additional incentives through all of the kinds of subsidies that we provide to employers for placements, for example. For example, the union-based training program. Unions have a special stream of money that they can apply for to bring in newcomers to the skilled trades. But we also have student work placements, over 10,000 this year, something that's been really, really well received by students and also employers. Employers get an additional incentive if they hire someone that's underrepresented, whether it is a woman or a person with disability, an Indigenous person. But I'm not sure it's enough. I'm not sure if it's enough. And it's really interesting, this challenge, because I've talked about this challenge in other sectors, where doing the right thing is actually the economically smart thing, and still no change happens. And that's the piece that I'm really excited about with your strategy, because I'm pretty sure you're having those conversations. The draft is very impressive. The consultations you've been having are very impressive. And we actually need those answers. We need that strategy. We need the guidance from people with lived experience, from experts, from unions, from employers, about what's going to make that difference. Because as we move forward and we invest billions of dollars every year in skills training, whether it's provincial transfers, by the way, which we protected the carve-out for people with disabilities, or whether it's through direct transfers to organizations or municipalities or people who are working in a way to try and help elevate skills training for people all across the country, we just are not seeing the kinds of results that we'd like to see. And that's, I could get up here and talk about all the wonderful things we are doing and be all glowing about it, and I think we're on the right track, and I think our motivation is correct, but I don't feel yet that we're actually cracking the code. And that's why the work that you're all doing is so important, because we need help. And we need to unlock the employer side as well. We need to figure out what is it going to take for employers to meaningfully start to change their practices, their processes, their own internal biases that prevent them from moving forward and actually not just doing the right thing, but seeing the kind of prosperity and the kind of growth that comes with a diverse workforce that includes people from all different walks of life, from all different backgrounds, from all genders. That's when, companies see that prosperity. And smart companies know this. Some of the smartest companies are the big banks, KPMGs and the McKinseys and the RBCs to a certain degree. And these folks have figured it out. They figured out that more women, more people with disabilities, more Indigenous people, more diversity is actually helping them grow and make money. But that isn't universal yet. And that's the challenge that we face together. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the Social Finance Fund, because I think this is an exciting, now so many people don't, maybe you know what Social Finance Fund is, but I say Social Finance Fund and I get a lot of blank stares. I'm pretty excited about the Social Finance Fund because I think it's something else that will help elevate and accelerate the work that we're doing. On November 21st, through the Fall Economic Statement, we announced the launch of the Social Finance Fund. This was created in consultation with stakeholders from across the country who work in not-for-profit organizations, who work in the charitable sector, who say there's a better way to do things. And if you could invest some money in helping us meet our goals, often charitable goals, while also ensuring that we have an opportunity to bring in more people, that we could actually accelerate your goals with ours. And so we're investing $755 million over the next 10 years to establish the fund, and $50 million over 2 years to help social purpose organizations improve their ability to successfully participate in the social finance market. So we anticipate this fund. Thank you. Thanks. It's a big number. We're pretty excited. It's not often that you have a committee and the committee suggests a number and you land that number. I have to give him a lot of credit to my colleague, Minister Duclos, who really fought to adequately fund this social finance fund, despite the fact that so many of our colleagues actually don't quite grasp what it's about. But for those of us who come from the charitable sector, for those of us who come from the not-for-profit sector, we understand that this is a way to elevate and amplify the work that we're doing and provide new opportunities. And so we anticipate the fund's going to create thousands of jobs, foster increased economic growth, and help us build a more equal and fair Canada. And it's going to enhance access to financing and business supports available to social purpose organizations, many of which provide training and workforce integration and employment services to groups that are facing multiple socioeconomic barriers. And I'll just give you an example. The Alberta Social Enterprise Fund has provided loans to social entrepreneurs who support employment opportunities for persons with disabilities and therapeutic programs for adults and children with physical and mental disabilities. So this is an opportunity to really partner, and really actually more than partner, let the sector lead. And that's what's so exciting for me. Also, I want to talk a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing on modern labor standards. Now, you might not see the direct link, but in fact, these modern labor standards, and Steve and I have talked about this on his show. I've been talking about doing it for a long time, so it was exciting to finally have it in legislation. But on October 29th, we introduced legislation that proposes updating the Canada Labour Code from really the mid-60s, the last time it was really reviewed in any substantial way. And these protections actually are designed to actually address the most vulnerable. Federally regulated employers actually often exceed the Canada Labour Code. They have unions, they are profitable private sector employers, but there are sectors, particularly in the airline sector, for example, other sectors that have extremely vulnerable employees. And so the modern labor standards are going to better protect Canadian workers, help to set the stage for better quality jobs, and really get rid of some of the abominable practices that I've heard about since I've been the Minister of Labour. Things like contract flipping, for example, that penalize oftentimes newcomers, women, people who have disability, who are living with multiple barriers. If you don't know what contract flipping is, it's essentially, Company A has a contract to clean a plane, let's say, clean the planes, sells it to Company B, and all of those workers go back to the beginning. Back to they're either laid off or they go back to the beginning of the pay scale. And so we're going to eliminate contract flipping, and we're really excited about that as part of our decent labor standards. But it'll also make sure that workplaces are more flexible so that people have the right to flexible work and requesting flexible work, to have advance notice of their scheduling. Whether you're living with a disability or not, I was a single mother for many years. If you can believe it, there were no protections for last-minute scheduling changes for people who are working in federally regulated sectors. Very hard to plan your life, very hard to plan the people around you that you may be relying on, whether it's for childcare or supports for yourself. Sick time, paid sick time. Can you believe that we didn't have paid sick time in the Canada Labour Code? So people were in the unenviable position of having to make a decision about whether they lost a day of pay or whether they went to work really ill. And that's something that we don't think anybody should have to make a decision about. And so there'll be paid sick time, there'll be time for domestic leave, paid and unpaid, so that when people are experiencing violence in their relationship, that they'll have support to actually take that time to resettle and figure out the next step. So we're taking many measures. I'd love to stay here all night and talk to you about the great things that we're doing, but I know that we're still not there yet. I want to thank you for the hard work that you're doing to help us get there more quickly. I think that when I think about this conference and I think about the draft strategy that you're working on, I think of it as a useful tool for people like me, hopefully me, but you never know, the next Minister of Employment who's going to have to make those decisions based on the evidence and the data that we're collecting now. For the first time, by the way. We're actually measuring the outcomes of our programs, and then start to shape the program so that they better meet the needs of all Canadians, including people with disabilities. Because we know that as a country, we can't prosper when we leave so much talent behind. And so I'm extremely proud to be here as your Minister of Employment. I'm extremely proud to be here as an ally, and I want to thank all of you for including me here tonight. Thank you.